shall we do an apposite missing word round? I think we should. OK, see if you can work out what the missing word is on this, because it ties in with some of what we just heard at PMQs. Reform Council, and in this case it's not Kent, although nice to hear one of them pick. Who was it? Ed Davey or Keir Starmer, who'd clearly been listening to the programme earlier when they pointed out that the Kent County Council it was Keir Starmer, is indeed a blueprint for what this country would look like if Reform were in charge, although not necessarily in the way that Nigel Farage intended when he described Kent County Council as a blueprint for what this country would look like if he was in charge. Reform Council doubles tax on second homes, despite blank. In fact, technically blank blank. Do you know what that is? Reform Council doubles tax on second homes despite blank blank. Blank blanks or blank... Anyway, missing words. What do you think they are? Reform Council doubles tax on second homes despite blank blank. Natasha, excuse me for a moment. I have to talk to Keith. I've got a woke watch, mate. I haven't had how long since we had a woke watch? Have we still got the jingle? Can you get the jingle out of the crypt? And then we'll apply it shortly for a woke watch story, which rather magnificently appears in today's Daily Telegraph. I thought everyone had given up on that, but it's back once again, like a renegade master. When we found those notes, well, not you and me personally, but she left in a room somewhere, didn't she? Sort of Kemi Badenoch mantras and
I am enough.
I am enough.
I'm strong.
I am a strong, confident woman. Did any of it say "stay calm"? I am calm.
No, but I think that I would advise her to do so if I were advising her to try to be better at PMQs.
She was so calm for the first 2 or 3 questions that her effectiveness, admittedly from a very low start, but her effectiveness increases exponentially when she stays calm.
Yeah,
and by calm, I don't just mean unexcited. I mean deliberately and studiedly calm, as in not even getting a bit breathless, not rushing, not just. I thought she was great for the first 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah, I agree with her. I think it's definitely a better look for her when she lowers her tone, lowers her voice, and just asks quite a scathing question, as she did at the top, saying, do you agree with what one of your cabinet ministers said today, that there's a toxic culture in number 10 Downing Street? And again, I didn't think that she would go on to this. I didn't think that she would talk about the Westminster psychodrama, but equally, it's probably just something that is just too tempting at a time like this, when the Prime Minister is clearly feeling a bit weak. And obviously, looking back at what we've seen over the last 24 hours, if you were in number 10 Downing Street this afternoon, will you look back on those briefings that happened last night, where you're talking about a potential leadership challenge, talking about West Streeting? Will you look at Prime Minister's questions today and go, oh, yeah, absolutely, thought that was a great briefing, and the Prime Minister came out fighting there. Did that work? Did that work to say we're a united team, as some people on the opposite benches are howling at you? And you've got quite a lot of Aggie Chambray texts in from the press gallery saying there are a few glum faces in this press gallery at the moment. Some of them look to be putting on a bit of a brave face. And that feels to me like that's not exactly a fantastic look to come out of Prime Minister's questions, with your top Prime Minister and his top team saying, we're all united, and pointedly...
Such an unnecessary episode, really.
Pointedly declining to say that you have full confidence in your top aide, Morgan McSweeney, as well.
And all handed to Kemi Badenoch, who, as you reminded us earlier, is much more likely to face a leadership challenge than Keir Starmer is in the near to middle distance, all handed to her on a silver platter.
Yeah, and it was clearly too tempting for her to avoid a swing.
Well, we both got that wrong. Yeah,
definitely. But, she's talking about feral MPs. She's talking about destabilising the market. She's obviously talking about what happened this morning with Wes Streeting, and obviously allies there pointing the finger at him as being the person most likely to try and launch a leadership challenge. There's a very different... it's hugely different to talk about Wes Streeting as a man who might take over from the Prime Minister. And those conversations, James, of course, are happening in the corridors of power around Westminster. It's a different thing to point the finger and say, this man could launch a leadership challenge to the Prime Minister within the next couple of days or weeks.
Well,
I just don't think it's going to happen.
But could it be true? Could it be true that they have got information that he's planning?
Yeah, I mean,
they must think it's true to brief people like Pippa Crerar at The Guardian, mustn't they?
Of course. And, in Pippa's report today, she's talking about about the fact that they believe that there could be 40 MPs ready to put their names to a potential Wes Streeting challenge. That, I think, is totally for the birds. It's not like the Tories. You have to put your name to this stuff. You can't do it anonymously with a letter behind the scenes. That is just not going to happen. I think it's totally crazy.
It's a very strange episode and probably of rather more interest to people like us than to the man on the Clapham omnibus, but it is nonetheless important because it is potentially fractures are appearing in the prime ministerial edifice. I have a very similar sense of humour to Jonathan in Deal, who writes in, when Kemi Badenoch said, "Not my words," just for a moment, James, I thought she was about to say, and indeed I would have given anything to hear her say, the words of Shakin' Stevens.
Not my words, Michael. The words of Shakin' Stevens.
It's made me and Jonathan laugh. Everyone else looks on in indulgent befuddlement. And then Ed David, well, do we need to talk more about, because as soon as she tried to move on to more substantive territory, the early start began to deflate slightly, I would say.
Yeah, I think she got a little bit excited when she was starting to talk about the unemployment figures, which arguably would have been my probably second or third choice for a topic for her to bring up. The unemployment figures reaching a high that we haven't seen since the pandemic, since lockdown. Equally, Keir Starmer had a ready reply saying unemployment under the Tories an average of 5.5%. Now that was, of course, after the financial crash, over 14 years, potentially not really comparable in those figures. She's saying, we left it a lot lower. But yes, obviously, as we go ahead of the budget, what is, of course, going to be on everybody's lips is how this budget is going to affect business, jobs and the economy, and whether Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves can actually get that growth that they keep promising us. And Keir Starmer, again, has a really strong story on this one and has a really, really strong response, talking about the stupid mistakes of Liz Truss, of the last Tory government. They were the ones that broke the economy. We're trying to rebuild it. And every time he manages to not go down on this.
And then Ed Davey, who objectively asked much more interesting questions than Kemi Badenoch did, although not necessarily tactically better in the interest of personal interest, but objectively much more interesting, starting with this ludicrous legal case that Trump is threatening to bring against the BBC. Of course, it's ludicrous in substantive and evidential terms. It's not necessarily ludicrous in actual terms, because we've seen American media organisations buckle and bend under threats that would almost certainly have been thrown out or defeated had they ever actually got to court. But if you're in the middle of a takeover that needs presidential approval or needs government approval, and the president comes along saying, you better look after me, you better give me something, otherwise you're going to, lovely little takeover you got there, be a shame if something happened to it. Then we've seen American media organisations bend over and reach for their wallet. The BBC unlikely to do so, but...
And they don't have a wallet to reach for, do they? Let's be honest, it's ours.
It's licence fees pay as money that Donald Trump is seeking to steal or secure, depending on your perspective. Davey went in pretty hard on that. Starmer resisted the opportunity to be similarly robust, but he wasn't. Yeah. He didn't roll over.
No, and number 10 of in the past few days since this BBC story broke, tread quite a fine line between defending the BBC but equally not attacking Donald Trump for daring to attack the BBC. They are saying, of course, the BBC have made mistakes over what we've seen, but obviously everybody is asking those questions. What happens if Donald Trump pushes this to a court case? Who is going to pay, and are the BBC liable for that? What happens if the BBC gets slapped with a huge fine? Do the government then step in to help pay for that? There's a lot of questions there.
There are questions to which David Allen Green, the legal expert who, before he hung up his broadcasting enthusiasms, used to be an enormous adornment to this programme. He's written a brilliant blog about it. There's a couple, actually, on his Substack, and chief among the observations he has made is that there is precisely no evidential proof of harm caused to Donald Trump exactly. In the legal letter that Donald Trump's lawyers sent. They haven't been able to point to any evidence whatsoever of reputational harm.
Yeah, he's probably just taking a punt, isn't he? Let's be honest.
Probably, and you couldn't even watch the programme in the United States of America where he won the subsequent election. So quite how you'd be able to claim that it has done him any damage.
No.
When the first thing they do in court is play out the entire speech, stick Donald Trump in the dock and ask him whether or not it's true that he won the 2020 election, at which point he either lies or abandons the lies that he's been telling ever since. But hey-ho, that's just me talking.
But he didn't get many answers out of the Prime Minister, I'm afraid, Ed Davey.
Because he's got to still walk that tightrope.
He has.
He can't, unfortunately, say any of the things that everybody knows to be true.
Exactly. And, calling on the Prime Minister to sack Robbie Gibb, the Conservative on the board of the BBC, I don't know if the Prime Minister has the power to do that. I don't believe that they do.
It's a prime ministerial appointment. Or a government appointment.
Yeah, I think obviously if there was that political pressure, there might be something you could do about it. I don't believe the Prime Minister has that power to sack people from the BBC. But it might be a culture secretary decision.
If it's an appointment, a government position. And, I mean, it is absolutely obscene that a man knighted for services to the Conservative Party is lecturing our friends and colleagues at the BBC on journalistic impartiality. Lewis Goodall dealt with him best on social media a few years ago when the man who dares to lecture other people on impartiality took a swing at Lewis for reporting something entirely innocuous, and Lewis responded by saying, well, maybe if I'm as impartial as you, one day I'll get a knighthood.
Bless.
But there we are. And it turns out this bloke Prescott as well is a lobbyist who is in the pay of, or his company at least, is in the pay of many of the tech companies that are very, very closely linked to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's administration. So colour me shocked. Imagine if any of this was happening on the other side of the political divide. The left-wing equivalent of Robbie Gibb was still trying to pull strings at the BBC. You would have a rather different complexion on much of the coverage. But nice to see Ed Davey recognising the reality that some of us have been screaming about for years.
Yeah, and fair to say, press freedom is at threat in the United States from the Donald Trump administration.
Gone, mate.
And there's
not under threat. It's disappeared.
And there is what does that happen if that comes here? There are totally questions there.
Indeed.
Editorial decision over this. But all Keir Starmer could say is that he's a strong supporter of the BBC. He can't guarantee that the government might not help him out. But yes, it feels a bit weak. The government don't clearly want to swing on this.
Everyone wants it to go ahead except Donald Trump's people, I imagine, who are just hoping for another successful shakedown of a big media company. Yeah. How much does it cost to make you go away? Which is, of course, how protection rackets have operated since.
And also the BBC don't want to drag this out into the court, I imagine. They don't want to see that.
I wish they would.
I'm sure there are.
Why not make a programme out of it?
Yeah.
It's sensational. Speaking of programmes, Nigel Farage has announced that he is boycotting the BBC.
I wonder why.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a bet with you. I bet he doesn't.
As in, he bet he doesn't do the boycott the programme? Or?
No, I bet he's back on the BBC by tea time tomorrow.
Well, he said he's boycotting this programme that Laura Kuenssberg is making with the Reform Party on the rise of the Reform Party.
Time, will he?
I imagine
He'll still be on Laura Kuenssberg's Sunday morning programme. So what exactly is the point that he's making?
I think he's making the point that I signed with Donald Trump over the BBC row, and that's exactly the message that he likes
enough to actually boycott the BBC.
Well,
although fair play to him if he does. I will eat a slice of humble pie if Nigel Farage promises today never to appear on the BBC again in protest at the 9-second
I don't think he has. I don't think he has, and I don't think he will.
Well, anyway, on the subject of Nigel Farage, Reform Council doubles tax on second homes despite blank. Anybody? Farage claims. So this is a council that is doubling the council tax on second homes, despite Nigel Farage's well-documented support for a Daily Telegraph campaign pledging or indeed opposing the government policy to allow councils to increase council tax on second homes. The whole thing, he said in May, is madness. Whatever the downsides of increased house prices, these people bring a lot of money into these areas, he said when supporting the Daily Telegraph's campaign to oppose the government's policy to let councils increase council taxes on second homes. How surprised would you be if he claimed today that he never said that at all and it was all a massive misquote? At a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised would you be that when he is caught once again in the horns of an epic hypocrisy, yet more evidence of either the the right hand not knowing what the far right hand is doing within his organisation, he would claim that he never said it in the first place. He does it all the time. He did it with Vladimir Putin. Do you remember? He said, I never said that I admired Vladimir Putin. So David Dimbleby played in the clip of him saying, the politician I admire most is Vladimir Putin. You might call that lying. I'm just asking questions. But yes, he has now claimed that he was misquoted by the Daily Telegraph, something that he had failed to point out every day since May, and that he is now denying that he ever called for the council tax premium to be removed, despite supporting a national newspaper campaign calling for the council tax premium to be removed. If you can't trust him, who can you trust, eh? Honestly.